Yonder Radio, Rural Conversations with National Reach. Hello, my name is Jared Iwi, and we're going to be together now for the next hour. I mean, if you so choose, and I will try to entice you with what's coming up. Okay, trivia, yes, an incredible story about the lead lab technologist at the Mayo Clinic. And you, just by that sentence, might not believe me, but it is really good. And of course, all the interviews and music and information you, I hope, are getting used to with Yonder Radio. And just to bolster our credentials, let's bring in Jan Podolsky, news editor for the Daily Yonder. What is going on in rural America?
Hi, Jared. This week we start with GRIST and their write-up of a new research published by the journal Science about how every dollar spent by the U.S. Forest Service to minimize wildfire risk saved about $4 in damages. The study looked at 285 wildfires across 11 western states between 2017 and 2023, and they've discovered that on average, those treatments decreased the total area burned by 36% and cut the amount of land burned at moderate to high severity by 26%.
And I'm just going to say that we might need a meaner animal than Smokey the Bear. Like, what is Cocaine Bear doing these days? Just something, Smokey the Beast, maybe, to threaten more about preserving and protecting our wildlands. From Canary Media, what is this? Wind and solar. New story.
Canary Media did a nice little analysis of which states rely most on wind and solar power. Iowa, South Dakota, and New Mexico lead the pack. In Iowa, last year, 61% came from wind and solar, with majority of that coming from wind. South Dakota, similarly, at about 59% of total power generated by the renewables. New Mexico is a little bit more balanced, with wind accounting for 36% and solar 17%. What's interesting, they also say that states like California and Texas are right behind the leaders. California last year, 38%, and they are definitely charging to much higher numbers with their 2030 clean energy targets. In total, 13 states generated more than 30% of their electricity from wind and solar last year.
And we have higher electricity demand, which I'm sure is playing a role there. And you news guys know how to dig. Governing.com. What is the battle over America's racetracks?
It was about how local racetracks are starting to disappear. They're being fought against, targeted by nuisance lawsuits, so lawsuits that regard, in this case, mostly noise issues. So a lot of states from Georgia to Wisconsin are trying to push back with the so-called right to race bills. But the really interesting thing about it is that outside of the nuisances to the public, it really comes down to the value of the land and the needs of developers who are desperately trying to get more land for development. And you would never guess it, but this one also goes all the way back to artificial intelligence infrastructure and people looking for vast tracts of really good flat ground to develop those massive data centers.
Jan, would you say people are racing to get this land? Sorry about that. Okay, I'll take a stop. Jan Podolsky, news editor from the Daily Yonder and survivor of my regular attempts at comedic wordplay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And now, this is the interview right here. How does someone go from being a farmer and a car mechanic, both noble and important professions, to the lead lab technologist at the Mayo Clinic? Jim Checkel of Casson, Minnesota, has been on that journey. And he sat down with Daily Yonder reporter Madeline DeFigueiredo to tell us all about it.
So my goal in life was to farm, but my father was very adamant that I was not going to farm, and he wanted me to go to school. And one of the things that was available in the area was a vocational school that offered an auto mechanics class. So I took automobile mechanics, and I started working for a Dodge dealership in 1980. And about 6 weeks after I started for them, Chrysler filed for bankruptcy and I lost my job. And so I was driving through my local town and I saw some cars that said Mayo Clinic on them. And I said, Mayo's got cars and they'll need mechanics. So I'm going to go apply to work there. And they told me they would never hire me because they had no need for mechanics because they leased their cars. And about a week later, I got a phone call from Mayo saying what they needed was someone to work in a lab that would do the things that nobody else in the lab would do or had time to do. So I started working there and doing very basic things, but there wasn't enough to do. So I started going around to other labs and just walking in and going, hey, what are you guys doing here? And then I would watch them do certain procedures and then ask them if I could do the procedures myself. Well, after a year, there was an opening in the allergy lab. I applied for it and they started asking me, do you know how to do these certain procedures? And I had already done them. So yeah, I know how to do that. I know how to do that. So after a few months of working in the lab, there was a lot of machines that needed repair and maintenance and things. And so he put me in charge of that. And he says, I want you to maintain the equipment. And I said, I don't know what most of this stuff is. And he said, we're not a mechanic, figure it out. And as I was starting to do different things with the machines, I would say, well, why do you use this? Why don't you use that? And so they said, well, why don't you figure out different methods if you think they'll work? So I started changing a few things. If they worked, I told everybody. If they didn't work, I just kept my mouth shut. And after a while, they were going to develop a cell culturing lab. And so my boss said that I went to him and I said, I need more to do. And he said, well, how about if we put you in charge of the cell culturing lab? And I says, I don't know anything about growing cells. And he said, you're a farmer and farmers grow things, figure it out. And in roughly 30 years, I became the lead technologist in the lab.
Wow. It's really a remarkable story and a testament to all the ways in which rural groundings can go on to shape all sorts of innovation. When was the turning point when you realized that your background in farming and growing up in rural Casson, Minnesota was going to be such a strong asset to your work in these Mayo Clinic labs?
We had several things that we were growing for plants where we were doing extracts of allergens like ragweed and molds and things like that, and soybeans. And so I started growing them on my parents' farm. So then we could take and analyze the plants and molds and stuff through the various stages of growth. And then it became quite apparent that this was something that was really needed. There were people that didn't know a thing about agriculture, and there were options of, for example, someone from a foreign country maybe had never seen ragweed. And so I started having people come from different areas and doing different activities. And so since I bought my farm in 92, I've had over 12,000 people out to my place. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's more than most farmers can say they've hosted. Can you just share a bit about how kind of being able to introduce 12,000 people to your farm, how did that play out in the way you saw people practicing healthcare or conducting their research or even the questions they asked about the type of medicine that they were exploring?
Mayo didn't offer a class on rural medicine, and they said, we're looking for someone to teach our medical students about issues that are rural issues, like pretty much any disease that you can pick up from farming. And after I got done being so excited about being asked to do this, I said, yeah, I think I could probably do that. Working with the Minnesota Farm Bureau and Minnesota Foundation for Agriculture and Zumbro Valley Medical Association, they said to me, establish a program. You got about a year and a half. So about 4 months later, we had the program up and going. Well, this will be the third year, I think, that we've had med students out to my place, and we go from front to back, everything. I have a list of about 45 things that are ag related, from power takeoff injuries to molds that they can be exposed to parasites from animals, to all these various things. And most of those are based on what I had learned when I was working at Mayo. Then we go to our local town hall and we get in people to come in and talk about experiences that they have as farmers, or we get in people to come in and talk about real mental health issues, which is a crisis now in the country. It's an incredible experience. It's like the highlight of my year to get these students out here.
And you're shaping that trajectory of education from the get-go around rural spaces is such a high impact opportunity. How are you seeing this change the ways in which students think about practicing medicine and the types of medicine that they want to deliver to their patients in the future?
One of the main students who was that I correspond with a fair amount had said that he had no interest or knowledge in anything about rural health issues. And he said now he's seriously considering making that a career. And so we also have students that come out and I'll see them later and they'll say that when they go to the emergency room at one of the local hospitals that Mayo supplies doctors to, they'll go there and somebody will come in and they've had a farm accident with a certain machine, or they show certain symptoms from a virus or an infection. And they say, yeah, I got this from handling sheep, or I got this from a whatever piece of machinery. The students then know, oh, I've seen that. I've heard about this. I now know what it is.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. My notebook is overflowing with notes from this conversation. I've learned so much and I really appreciate your time.
Oh, I thank you for wanting to hear my story.
That was reporter Madeline DeFigueiredo talking with Jim Checkel, former lead technologist of the Mayo Clinic. He'll tell you that he's retired, but and honestly, with that interview, it's hard to believe because there's a car around him somewhere that he wants to work on. We'll have a break coming up soon, but first, we're going to hear from this week's featured musician. She has some bangers, and we're going to hear them. Shirlette Ammons. Shirlette recently played a set at the Big Ears Music Festival, which takes place in bars, churches, and concert halls across Knoxville, Tennessee. Daily Yonder contributor Philip Norman caught up with Shirlette while she was on the road to the festival.
I am from a little tiny municipality in eastern North Carolina called Botankus, North Carolina. Most people know Mount Olive, North Carolina, because we're known for producing pickles. So Mount Olive is in close proximity to Botankus. So normally I just tell people I'm from Mount Olive. My mom had 12 brothers and sisters, and I have an identical twin sister and a load of cousins. And so I grew up in essentially a village of rural Black people farming and living off the land and being creative in open space.
On the verge of a heart attack for a hill of beans, work against the grain just to get the feed. So I press my harvest in cassettes and left all the makings of your vast array.
What would you say about how growing up where you grew up has shaped you as a musician?
Coming of age in the MTV era, not having access to that in the rural South. So I got all that stuff kind of secondhand. We'd stay up late and listen to Friday nights, so watch Friday night videos, but we didn't have MTV. So my cousin, who lived in town, would make a VHS of all the music videos and give it to us, and that's how we stay up on what was happening in the burgeoning days of hip hop, and really cherished all the channels through which things got to you. It was kind of like playing a game of telephone in some ways. The experience was really isolated and very coveted. Also, I grew up in the church like most rural Black people, or most Black people of a certain era, in the Baptist church, singing in the choir and stuff like that. So that certainly had an influence on my musical interests, and gospel music still is important to me, like in terms of the way I frame the music I make as the truth, in the same vein that gospel music was my truth growing up. The storytelling aspect, the having a strong belief and standing behind what you say as a reflection of how you live. I don't know if my mama would call my music gospel music, but I would.
Right, yeah, the spirit and the ethos, right.
Right, exactly. Growing up listening to like James Brown and all that stuff, like like Sly Stone and P-Funk and all that, certainly had its influence.
I just listened to the album right before we talked, your most recent album, Spectacle. That's what came through to me first listening through into production, was like a funk influence.
Absolutely. I mean, I just think I am a product of groove-based music.
Peep the vultures with the circus and the narcissism. Through the peeking blinds, behind the tainted lenses, they're taking best remember for neighborhood headlines.
I just wanted to ask you about your lyrics. I mean, the themes that you most enjoy engaging with. I picked up on some things, but I'd just love to hear from you what you want the lyrics to do.
I think the way we talk in Eastern North Carolina and also Black vernacular is something to be exalted and celebrated. One thing I try to do is lean into that language that is uniquely mine, based on my experience and based on where I'm from. And this is me being a product of hip hop and poetry. I think I write really percussively. So I write with a lot of dense interior rhyme, and then I go back and try to loosen it up.
Ornery, cause my portion was shorter than I ordered. My life this former cornered me, so I cut that corner. Pestered by stress like a splinter, had to reset my center.
Content-wise, I write predominantly about the intersections of my own personal existence. Being Black, being Southern, being queer. And then also the personality traits that come from being those things, like most rural people have sat on a porch and just watched shit happen, watched things go by. So there's an innate observation to that experience. So I feel like I'm a consummate observer. I ask a ton of questions, almost to a annoyance. You can ask, yeah. My mama used to call me the "but why" kid.
But why?
So I've just always been. I don't easily accept things
Hmm.
without probing them and turning them over several times to make sure that I'm satisfied with the answer.
Yeah, sitting on the porch watching shit happen. I mean, are there any features of your music and your musicality that you feel are like reflective of a rural context you grew up in?
Working in tobacco fields, and we didn't have an indoors toilet till I was 12 years old. Only as I've gotten older have I really realized the value of chronicling these experiences kind of as like a treasure trove of a lost lore in some ways. I take that seriously. I think that's the part of the role of an artist, is to chronicle the moment in which they live. I try to really document the landscape I come from, and that kind of goes back to the thing I discovered fairly early on about how special the place I came from was.
Hey, well, thank you so much. I hope you have a smooth rest of your drive. You've been really generous, and I just appreciate everything you shared.
No, my pleasure, my pleasure. Thanks so much, man.
You shouldn't wrinkle, shouldn't shrivel, fade away. Hey.
That was Philip Norman interviewing poet and musician Shirlette Ammons about her own unique brand of gospel music. Her most recent album, Spectacles, was described as one of the best records of the year by the NPR Music Desk. See, we are bringing the talent here on Yonder Radio. We'll have more music after the break, which is, I'm telling you, this show is stacked. We're bringing in a comedian who's on Netflix. We have Susanna, who's in Kansas, with a great interview. And, great news from the Mohawk Nation. But we have one more order of business, this clue, which is the first in our series of 3 for this week's trivia. The answer is a town situated on the Pajarito Plateau in the southwest. It only has 13,000 residents, but it's famous all around the world. That is your first trivia clue, and we're going to, lead you along shamelessly until the end when we have the answer. And all the other great information that comes with this show on the way on Yonder Radio. This is Yonder Radio, Rural Conversations with National Reach. I'm your host, Jared Iwi, and we have comedy coming up. We're going to hear more from Shirlette Ammons because she is fantastic. The music is incredible. And now, Salina, Kansas. We're talking with Kristen Bush, actor and producer. She goes by Kiki and is known for her work in movies and television like Paterno, American Parent, Liberal Arts, Law and Order, SVU. And recently, she co-wrote and produced a short film set in Kansas called The Game Camera. She moved back to rural Kansas in 2020 and has since become an advocate for the arts and a co-founder of the organization Rural Women Films. Kiki spoke with Daily Yonder culture reporter Susanna Brown about film tax credits and the beauty and challenges of filmmaking in rural Kansas.
I know that you have been a major advocate for state-level film tax credits for Kansas. What exactly does that mean, and why is that such an important issue for you?
Well, I'm afraid I have to start with some bad news first. This is the 4th year in a row that this tax incentive for films is not going to go through this year. And I'm not going to lie, it hurts. I've spoken twice in front of the Kansas House and Senate. I had the opportunity to show our short film at the Capitol on Kansas Day, all a part of this advocacy work. And let me just say that 38 states in the nation have some kind of film tax incentive. And these incentives are the main reason that film producers choose to go film in any given state. This bill is about local Kansans, local students, local film people who want to stay in Kansas and make movies. I just met a 62-year-old woman who made her first film ever. She made it in California, but she lives in Salina, and she wants to make more movies in Kansas. And those are the people that you're hurting. You're not hurting Hollywood. They call filmmakers up here in Kansas and they say, do you guys have incentives? And as soon as they get the no, they hang up the phone. So it's about staunching that creative brain drain instead of saying to a student at Shocker Studios in Wichita, for example, who has this amazing education, and then we say to them, sorry, there's no work for you here. You need to go to New Mexico or Georgia or LA or New York. But we would say to them, actually, yeah, there is a burgeoning film industry, and that's in part because of these film incentives. It's also about who controls your story. I'm so tired of traveling around the world or around the country. And when I say, I'm from Kansas, they're like, oh, Dorothy. That's an almost 90-year-old movie that was shot exclusively on a soundstage in Southern California, and it has very little to do with the people who actually live in Kansas. And I'd like to change that.
You got involved with a lot of this advocacy work because of your own work making films in Kansas, especially your project, The Game Camera. Can you tell me about this short film?
Yeah, The Game Camera. Well, let me say that I am a female actor in my 40s, and after 30, women's roles drop quite a lot. That's statistically proven. And I got married to a writer, so I think that legally binds me to put him to work to write me roles. I think that's in our wedding vows. And that and our mutual love of our home state and the beauty of the land that we live on compelled us to write our short film that we entitled The Game Camera.
Can you tell us the elevator pitch or the plot synopsis?
You got it. I'll give you the log line, and that is when a grieving woman installs a night vision camera in her mini horse's corral, the specter of a human intruder on her rural Kansas ranch makes her reconsider her husband's death.
Very compelling. That's a great logline.
Thank you. It was based on real events that happened when Rolf moved to this property. He put a game camera on the tree line and he saw feral cats and he saw deer and he saw all these interesting things. He even saw a bobcat. He did see at 3 a.m. one night some dude walking around, and he told me that story. And A, I was like, okay, we have to start locking our doors. And B, I was like, hey, I think this would make a really good story.
So this seems like a movie that place and setting is so important to it. So what was it like making a movie in rural Kansas about rural Kansas?
It was hard and it was wonderful. Professional actors and professional crew is very hard to come by in rural Kansas, and I would posit probably anywhere in rural America. One of the things I really wanted to do was to hire all professional actors from Kansas, which I did. I'm super proud of that. Maybe there's a moment that amplifies just what it means this whole process meant to me. And that was I was driving to set and everybody was ready and I was executive producing this film that I had co-written that I was starring in. It was at a level that I had gotten used to on the urban coasts. And I thought to myself, I'm doing this. I'm bringing this whole thing to life. And I had to pinch myself. And it happened so fast, but I still think back to this moment of like, wow, this can really happen.
I'm curious how the reception has been to The Game Camera.
There's a moment in the film where we get to show our 30 acres with the cottonwood trees. And there have been times where the audience kind of goes, oh. And those are the moments that I kind of live for, because as actors, as storytellers, as creators, you want to touch people and you want to show them, you know what, Kansas isn't ugly. And those moments when we've been able to connect with an audience on the beauty level, it might have been worth the whole thing, dare I say it.
If you could leave people with final message about the importance of state level film tax credits or about making movies in Kansas about Kansas, is there a message you would like to leave people with?
I would really encourage Kansans especially to think of the films that they love the most that are set in Kansas. And then if they draw a blank at Paper Moon and Picnic and The Wizard of Oz, then I would encourage them to think a little bit about how they would like their own stories to be told. And one of the ways to change that is to maybe include our state in the 12 others who don't have film incentives, because that would sure help.
Thank you so much, Kiki, for all of your work. Where can people find you and your projects?
Well, we've got ruralwomenfilms.com is our website where you can see the trailer. And because the game camera is still making the rounds in film festivals, we're not allowed to have it out online. But as soon as we're done showing in film festivals, it will be easily watchable online. But I really thank you for your interest, because I think having more interest like yours is another way that we get the word out.
Thank you so much for being here.
That was Kansas-based actor Kiki Bush, interviewed by Susanna Brown. Next, we're getting a little dose of wisdom from Daily Yonder columnist Donna Kallner. And just pay attention, people. This is a beautiful note from her. She lives in rural Wisconsin, halfway between the equator and the North Pole, and she writes a bi-weekly column for the Daily Yonder called 45 Degrees North. This week, she shares some thoughts about how rural communities can get younger generations more involved and local leadership. And yes, younger generations, it does involve text, not call.
Rural communities need younger people to step up into leadership roles in local government, volunteer organizations, churches, schools, and families. But too often, those younger people run up against ways of doing things that have stopped making sense. We can do better for them. For example, we can show up on time for meetings, knowing what needs to be accomplished, and get to it. That's baseline respect for people who make childcare arrangements and drive extra miles to drop off and pick up kids or hire a babysitter. Those people are not just missing time with family, they're incurring extra costs. We can remember to say, I know it took effort for you to be here and want you to know it's appreciated. It's also a measure of respect to younger volunteers to use the tools they use. Post meeting information on a cloud-based calendar app so busy people can look up what they need to know on a work break or after the kids are in bed. Now that phone books are obsolete, we need to ask for and give out cell phone numbers. When a meeting is canceled or relocated at the last minute, a text group can alert a dozen people before they even leave home. Text rather than call. Those who haven't permanently turned off the ringer on their phone won't appreciate a call that wakes a teething baby. In our rural communities, everything from 4-H to vacation Bible school to town governments require materials and preparation, often paid for and accomplished by volunteers who could be doing something else. Most of them volunteer because they want to contribute to the community. Most of them don't expect anything more than a bit of courtesy and unspoken recognition that their time and efforts are appreciated. We can do that. This is Donna Kallner from 45 Degrees North for Yonder Radio.
That was Daily Yonder contributor Donna Kallner. You can read more of her work at dailyyonder.com. And now, it's time for another song from Shirlette Ammons. Spectacles is the title track from her latest album. And here it is on Yonder Radio.
Spectacles, you think we wearing dead shoes? The way they clock in every move, they are spellbinded by the groove, it's obvious. They can't stop watching. They can't stop watching. Spectacles, you think we wearing dead shoes? The way they clock in every move, they are spellbinded by the groove, it's obvious. They can't stop watching. Can't look away. It's so positively obvious, it's common sense. They duplicates, copycats, counterfeits. We alley cats, battle cats, pussy, please. We on the grind, feeding time, lick and leave. Hey, in case you miss me, I'm audible city, dodging this underbelly. It's 5 points like Piccadilly. Fondness for 3-ring circuses, martyrs be dying to see what I'm moving like double dutch. One card of my own avant-garde. Cop a spot if you like. Spectacles, you think we wearing dead shoes? The way they clock in every move, they are spellbinded by the groove, it's obvious. They can't stop watching. They can't stop watching. Spectacles, you think we wearing dead shoes? The way they clock in every move, they are spellbinded by the groove, it's obvious. They can't stop watching.
That was Spectacles by Shirlette Ammons. You can find her music at shirletteammons.com. a record store near you, or wherever you get your music online. And now we go back in time to the early 1900s to hear the incredible story. And I am one to use the word incredible too much, but please, people, trust me when I tell you I carry the mantle of incredible with much pride to this story of Martin Himmler, a Jewish Hungarian immigrant who, despite himself being a lousy coal miner, built a one-of-a-kind coal community in eastern Kentucky. And he didn't stop there. Anya Patron Slepian delivers the details on the story of Martin Himmler. Can you begin the Himmler journey for us?
Yeah, so he came from a small town in Hungary, and he immigrates basically against the wishes of his parents and his family, because at that time it was seen as a failure. Their family at first was sort of ashamed that he decided to immigrate, and he arrives in New York in 1907. He's got about 13 cents in his pocket, doesn't have really connections anywhere, and so he finds himself being transported, supposedly for free, to a coal mine in West Virginia to start doing work there. And once he gets there, he finds out, okay, the free transport wasn't actually free. They charged him for that. They also charged him for his work boots and work clothes. They were charging him room and board for the equipment that he needed. So he found himself basically $1,200 in debt right off the bat.
And he finds out he's not even a good coal miner. Like,
he does find that out too.
He just admits that.
Yes.
What a lesson for everyone, for that mental honesty, that emotional honesty to say, you know what? I've invested in this and it's not working out.
No, he lasts about 8 days of being not a very good coal miner. And then he leaves and has to start over again immediately.
And then this is where it gets real. This is where the Martin Himmler story shines.
Yeah, so he's very entrepreneurial. He has a bunch of businesses, and some of them do better than others. And after a while, he founds this Hungarian language weekly newspaper that focuses on mining, because there was at the time a huge wave of Hungarian immigrants in Appalachia specifically that were involved in the coal mining industry. And so he has this newspaper, and in doing so, he's learning more about coal mining, he's gaining trust with the community. And then eventually in 1920, he does something that nobody has ever done before, which is he founds the first and only cooperatively owned coal mine. So that means that the miners own shares in the company, they sit on the board of the company. It is a full-on co-op, while the rest of the mining industry is these really brutal and sort of exploitative businesses.
He's ahead of his time. It's remarkable, A, that this is the only cooperative coal mine in America.
In the world.
In the world. Okay. Even more incredible, sadly so. But then he's really ahead of his time as far as standards of living and looking after his employees.
Yes. So across Appalachia, coal camps are notorious, and coal camps are the communities that grow up around coal mines, often owned by the coal companies themselves. Miners pay rent. Often they pay artificially high prices to live in pretty poor conditions. It's infamous that there would be company stores and you'd be paid in scrip, which can only be used at the company store. So the whole thing's a racket. Not in Himmlerville, which is the town that grows up around the Himmler Coal Company that Martin Himmler founded. In Himmlerville, the miners all own their homes, and they also have a much higher standard of living. All of the houses have electricity. All of the houses have indoor plumbing. The school quickly became the best school in Kentucky. It is way off the charts in terms of what every other community in that area and really elsewhere across the country was doing.
The prices dropped after World War I. And a little mine is not keeping up with the bigger ones.
The company was founded at a time when prices were really, really high because of the war, and after the end of the war, that no longer was true, and so the company couldn't survive anymore.
And if this person isn't Martin Himmler, the credits would roll on his movie. It's over.
You would think.
You would think. No, the credits stop because there's more. It's like we're always waiting at the end of the funny movie for something cute. Himmler is back. What is next?
Yeah, Act 2 for Martin Himmler is that when the Second World War broke out, he enlisted in the military at the age of 55. He joined what was at the time the Office of Strategic Services, which was a precursor to what is now the CIA, and he joined basically to investigate and interrogate Hungarian Nazis. He later expanded that search and was responsible for tracking down, getting information to convict hundreds of Nazis. And in 2021, he was posthumously awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. That was his act too.
Where can people learn more about this impressive American immigrant?
So there is a group in Martin County, Kentucky, which is where Himmlerville, now Beauty, is located. And the Martin County Historical Society has been working really hard to try to get the word out about Himmler and also to preserve the remaining parts of Himmlerville. So there are over 30 miners' homes that are still standing. People are still living in them. And Himmler's mansion, Himmler House, had to be deconstructed, but they are making efforts to save what they can and to rebuild it. And there are efforts to get Himmler House, as well as Beauty as a whole, designated as a national landmark.
Well, if you are down and out and in debt and feeling lost, what would Himmler do? He would I don't know, just change all of his community for the better, apparently, and then serve his country heroically.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
After lunch. Anya Patron Slepian, incredible story. It's at dailyyonder.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're about to take a quick break, but first we'll give you the second clue to this week's trivia. Our mystery town is truly that mysterious and has a lot in common with Sarov, Russia, which became its sister city in 1993. Developed in secret beginning in 1943, our answer, this American town, is now open to the public, unlike its Russian counterpart, where visitors still need a special government permit to get through the heavily guarded perimeter. It's like I'm reading a Tom Clancy novel to you here. What is the answer? That will be coming up, along with an interview with Eeland Stribbling, a comic who's doing quite well and on Netflix now, and some great news from the Mohawk Nation on the way on Yonder Radio. This is Yonder Radio, rural conversations with national reach. Hello, I am your host, Jared Iwi. Coming up, we will make you giggle with, and that's a promise, with Eeland Stribbling, a comic climbing the ladder, and he is on Netflix, and Nate Bargatze's comedy showcase. So we're going to talk to him. But first, incredible story out of Onchiota, New York. Stuart Huntington is a reporter with ICT News, and he takes us all the way up to the Canadian border where 600 acres of land have recently been returned to the indigenous Haudenosaunee Confederacy.
As a young person, I used to hike that area. It's heavily wooded, and I knew that woods like the back of my hand.
David Fadden is the director of the Six Nations Iroquois Cultural Center in the heart of Haudenosaunee territory in New York's Adirondack Mountains.
And I always had a fear that it would be sold off to developers or loggers because it's such a beautiful tract of land.
Today, his fears are gone. The land, 600 acres of it, is back in Haudenosaunee hands after the Nature Conservancy helped raise $1.1 million to buy it for the Cultural Center from Paul Smith's College in March. Fadden, a Mohawk citizen, has some great plans for the property.
The initial plan is to preserve it and let it heal itself. Let the trees grow, and in a way it's starting up a new old growth forest. And also, we're going to invite knowledgeable folks from the reservation and other territories to come to explore the property, to identify what's on there in terms of medicinal plants, food plants, animals, and their habitats and their trails. In coming years, I'll develop a trail system that will avoid the more sensitive areas. So if we don't walk on delicate plant life, and so that we can actually go into the forest and experience the property like I used to.
The Cultural Center was founded by Fadden's grandfather, Ray, a school teacher who worked tirelessly to preserve Haudenosaunee culture in difficult times.
And he was a school teacher at Tuscarora Reservation in the 1930s. And it was during that time, in the 30s and 40s, that a lot of our cultures was starting to disappear, due to residential schools. And and so he was a maverick in a sense, and he couldn't teach out in the open the true history of this country and treatment of indigenous people. and he couldn't teach the culture. And so we had to do it underground in secret.
Which brings to the Land Return Project extra meaning, says Peg Olson, the New York State Indigenous Partnerships Director for the Nature Conservancy.
Some of the members of the Haudenosaunee community had come to us and asked if we could help find a property in the Adirondacks where the Haudenosaunee could gather as a community. And so when we realized this property was up for sale, it had all the elements that could provide an opportunity for ecological restoration. It had cabins that would be good for a youth camp. And it happened to be right next door to the Six Nations Iroquois Cultural Center. So it's like all the stars aligned.
And with a unique legal twist, the conservation easements placed on the land, when they are filed with the court, they will be in English and Mohawk.
We crafted the easement in a way that it'll express our views on taking care of the land, as well as the Nature Conservancy and the other parties involved. And so it'll be probably the first document of this sort in New York State, if not the country, where it has indigenous language contained within this document, and we'll refer to it as the Caretaking Covenant.
For ICT, I'm Stuart Huntington.
You can get more coverage of Indigenous stories and communities at ictnews.org. And now, he's named after a large antelope in Africa. Eeland Stribbling got his name from his grandfather, who was a wildlife biologist and avid fisherman, and he bequeathed that hobby unto his grandson. And Eeland now going to be seen not just by a river near you, but Nate Bargatze's comedy showcase. He's on Netflix now, and Kevin Hart's new show, Funny AF. But Eeland Stribbling is on there. More importantly, he joins us now to talk about fishing and comedy. Take us back to the sights, the sounds, the smells of getting up and going fishing with your grandfather.
Yeah, you know, it's a classic fishing with the grandpa story where you're reluctant to go. He kind of drags you out there at first, and you know, it's listening to like old blues on the radio, like BB King sort of blues.
Are you like, Grandpa, how's this supposed to motivate us?
Yeah, yeah, because it's all just about sad and either getting cheated on or cheating. It's all very melancholy love music. And then you get to the lake. But I always remember you got to the lake before the sun rose. And then we sat there as the sun would rise. And then I was like, this is the most boring thing ever, but it was peaceful. It was quiet. I didn't understand why he did it now, but I definitely understand why
Yeah.
people do that. That eventually turned into me like playing with bugs and looking at the water and running around, just being like a little dirty outdoor kid, every other weekend, every couple of weekends. So
Okay, well, now time for some comedy bits. Are you a bit ready?
let's do it.
Yeah, this is Climate Change versus Racism from Dr. Squatch's Don't Tell Comedy, showcased with our guest, Eeland Stribbling.
I care about climate change way more than I care about racism, right? To put it like, I would much rather someone call me like a but we have like clean air to breathe than someone be like, this is a safe space, but don't drink the water. Does that make sense? Like I would much rather a hate crime in paradise than the inverse of that. Like, be racist to me on a beach. That would be lovely. That would be so nice, I actually go to Klan meetings and I try to convince the Klan to care about climate change. I do. I go to Klan meetings and I go, hey guys, thanks for having me. Don't you want your great-great-grandchildren to hate my great-great-grandchildren for no reason? I'm like, the sun's hotter, it's gonna make more black people. That's not what y'all want. Like, that's not...
Racism versus climate change. Either people love it or people kind of get a little bit upset at it. But the whole idea is, I went to the seminar and there was like a racial injustice and climate change class. And the speaker, their name is Parker, very, very sweet, very like mindful and can like speak to all these different experiences, and was talking about how if we solved a lot of climate change stuff, then we would solve like a lot of just systematic stuff for people, whether it's racism or inequality or wealth inequality or whatever. And I was sitting there and I was like, as a black man, as a proud black man, which one do I care about more?
Well, I can certainly make arguments that you care about both, because here you have this reputation of getting people not only to care about the environment around them, but you're getting people out perhaps
Yeah.
in communities that otherwise wouldn't have been able to go out and enjoy fly fishing.
My grandfather was the first black biologist in Colorado. His name is Theodore Washington. And I remember one day I had come home from a fly fishing event. I was like the only non-white person at the event. And I just like came home and was telling him, I'm like, it kind of like sucks to be like the only one in the room. Like it feels, although I had like friends and community there, it feels isolating to look around and like not see anyone at least who looks like you, or have, besides this thing we call fly, there wasn't any other connection. And he told me, he was like, well, I went through what I went through so that you could be in those rooms. Everything that he went through made space so that I can be like a huge fly fishing nerd. My fishing career or hobby or whatever is just so that like the next generation can be like, yeah, fly fishing isn't a black or white. It's just like what nerds do. Like someone's like, yeah, nerds fly fish because Eeland he's a fisherman and he's a nerd. When I would guide people, I try to keep it as low key as possible. I'm like, if you want to come here and you want to try to slam the biggest fish or the most fish, bro, we could talk bugs. We can get into the nitty gritty. We could talk CFS and weather patterns and pressure and all this stuff, feeding habits. Or if you're just like, I want to cast a couple times, then take a nap next to the river. As long as you're out here, that's all that matters. Like that's cool.
Well, I grew up in Colorado, and we were always just bait fishing for trout for
Yeah.
food. And it was very aggressive. It was desperate. And so now when I go fishing, yeah, I'll throw a line in, success or not. I'm like, well, I'm just going to soak my feet in this cool river and then maybe drink, or I don't know, just stare at the
Yeah.
sky.
So I can understand someone who fishes to like feed themselves. I'm like, yeah, don't fly fish. That's the worst way to that's the worst way to catch fish.
Wait. You're saying fly fishing isn't necessary?
No, bro, not even remotely. Like fly fishing is such a you're waving sticks at fish.
Okay, well, a main point I've been able to take away from this conversation is you're just a guy who happens to be black who's fishing. It's white journalists. We've gone crazy. We go like, oh, you're who we're looking for.
Yeah, and a lot of it happened kind of during COVID, during the after George Floyd got murdered. A lot of that happened. There was like a lot of, we gotta find diverse voices and we gotta find people with new perspective. And my perspective as a black fly fisherman, outdoorsman, sportsman, or whatever, is not unique at all. My voice is one voice of hundreds, thousands, millions of people who do this. But I kind of got pushed into the limelight, and then of course it sort of snowballed effect. But yeah, I'm just a dude with beautiful chocolate sun-kissed skin who loves trout and tarpon and carp and will sleep by the river and have a glass of whiskey and enjoy the day.
Well, Eeland, I greatly appreciate this. I love a good comic. I love a great story, and I thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, man, I appreciate for thinking of me and reaching out, and I'm glad we could jump on.
That was comedian Eeland Stribbling, a comedian who grew up fly fishing in Colorado and is on his way to do great things in the big city with some big jokes. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. We've got one more trivia clue for you before the answer is revealed. Here's the final clue. In 2022, this town became a primary filming location for an Oscar-winning movie featuring historic landmarks like Bathtub Row and Fuller Lodge. Are you ready? The answer, Los Alamos, New Mexico. Best known as the home of the Manhattan Project, which developed the atomic bomb from 1943 to 1945. The project was closely guarded, a big military secret, but required thousands of scientists, military personnel, and office workers who were covertly routed first to Santa Fe and then 35 miles into the mountains. Today, the Los Alamos National Laboratory employs around 18,000 people in northern New Mexico and continues its work on nuclear and other scientific research. In 2022, Los Alamos was a primary filming location for Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's blockbuster film about the development of the atom bomb. And weekly, we develop this show in secret so that we can unveil to you rural conversations with national reach. We appreciate your being a part of the program, and you can listen, learn more, and share everything about Yonder Radio, and we highly encourage it at yonderradio.com. Thank you for listening to Yonder Radio, a production of the Center for Rural Strategies, publisher of the Daily Yonder. I'm your host, Jared Iwi. The Living Tradition segment was produced by Nicole Musgrave. Thanks to Don Castle and the Tennessee Sheiks, Steph Gunno and the Lone Tones, Quincy Ponfair, Leo Pozell, and Tim Merima for the great music. Our editor and producer is Susanna Brown. This episode was also produced by Anya Patron-Slepian with additional support from Alana Newman and Julia Tilton. Our executive producer is Joel Cohen. The executive in charge of production is Adam Georgie. Yonder Radio, rural conversations with national reach.